Welcome back, guys. Today I want to answer a question that I think a lot of people have, and that is, can you realistically daily drive a 2500 series truck and not have it be a complete pain in the butt? So the way I'm going to answer that is by taking you through a little day here of an hour of errands I have to run. I'm going to be using this truck completely not for what it's made for. All right, so I've got this massive loaded up. And the other errands I need to run are cashing in some lottery tickets, and then I need to deliver something to the vet, and I'll just leave it at that. This video is really made for somebody who already owns a half-ton truck and is kind of on that fence where they want to upgrade, but they're afraid it's too big. This will also, I'll talk a little bit about if you own just kind of a car or maybe a mid-sized truck, and then, upgrading to this as well. That'd be a more extreme change, of course, but that is a scenario some people are in, right? You decide you want to get like a camper and you want to get a big camper, so you're jumping from maybe just a SUV or a car straight to a 3/4 ton truck or a 1 ton. So that is a possibility. So I'll kind of work that in this video too, but that just kind of gives you an idea of where I'm coming from with this. Alright guys, so the elephant in the room here, to start off this video, is the fact that this truck is the size of an elephant. So for daily driving purposes, in this case hauling a single propane tank, giving some lottery tickets, or turning some lottery tickets in, and delivering something to the vet that may or may not be, have came out of the inside of my dog. But anyway, it's a lot of overkill, right? And that's something that people, rightfully so, are concerned about. They don't really want to drive a 3/4 ton truck to run their daily errands. I get it. I don't either. I actually don't normally drive this truck for errands because I can take my Silverado or my Camaro or even sometimes my motorcycle. So I definitely don't think this is the best vehicle for running errands, but I just kind of want to show you guys how it works, for better or worse. And you can decide if whatever towing capacity you want and or compensation you want, if it's worth the extra hassle from a daily driving perspective. So just to start it off, right, just bumming around town here, getting through my neighborhood, the daily driving aspect is fine. This isn't a tight neighborhood. If you live in the middle of New York City kind of thing, well, it's going to be a little more difficult, right? But around here it's totally fine. Another issue with kind of bumming around town, daily driving this, running errands in this, is your fuel economy. If you are not on the interstate with a warmed up engine kind of moving along, you are going to get 10 to 12. That's just what's going to happen. Now, a half ton, only driving around in the city, even an EcoBoost, especially a V8 half ton, is only going to get maybe 13, 14, 15, so it's not going to be too much better, but it will be better. And obviously if you're just daily driving a regular car, well, you're going to get potentially 3 times the fuel economy this thing gets, or at least 2.5 times in the city. So keep that in mind. However, I've also had another video of explaining why city fuel economy almost doesn't really matter. You can watch that in the card over here and decide if that's something that you want to kind of factor in or not. The next thing we're going to evaluate is kind of the thing I think most people are more concerned about, which is the parking situation and stuff like that. So we'll kind of jump to that. Okay, so we're pulling up to our first parking situation here. And luckily the parking lot's not very full, but this is a perfect example of where a 3/4 ton truck starts to be not as good of an errand running vehicle as something else. So this is a relatively tight parking lot. So you can see how tight this is, and you have a couple options. You can either do the backup deal, and if there's cars in here, it gets a lot harder to do. Or you can try to pull in, but if you pull in forward, it's kind of difficult to pull out sometimes. So luckily the cameras make it pretty easy to park, and the mirrors, you can really see the line super well. So I find that, on these trucks, it's actually not that hard to park them. I find it harder sometimes to park my Camaro with how bad that visibility is than I do this 3/4 ton truck. So you might be surprised, especially with the cameras nowadays, how easy of a time you have parking. And it's kind of funny I say that because I had to reposition, but usually I just get it in one shot. And then with that, you can see the lines, Make sure you're in them. I don't know if I can get the camera to see that line, but not too bad. So this is stop number 1. We're gonna run the unnamed biomaterial for my dog to the vet, and we'll come back to you guys here. Okay, stop number 1 is done. I delivered my item to the vet. Sorry guys, I'm just having a lot of fun making it awkward for you. So I'm gonna put the camera down here for a second. Okay, so pulling out of the parking lot now, we're gonna play pretend and make believe there's a car right next to us and kind of get a feel for that. So, you know, if there were a car here, I'd have to pull all the way up to here and then crank the wheel, barely clear the corner of that car, and then look at, I'm almost off on their grass on this side. So again, that's where the whole 3/4 ton long truck thing becomes a bit of an issue. Now a 1/2 ton crew cab 6.5 foot bed would have the same problem turning radius wise, but this is where you feel the truck size when you're kind of going in and out of these parking lots. So just kind of keep that in mind. That's going to be a disadvantage. And this gas station has really no good parking. That sounded really bad. So if you look, there's really no good parking over there, so I'm going to wind up parking in Subway's parking lot. They're not even open yet. So we just kind of nosed in Subway's parking lot, but now we're a little further away from the door. Like that guy in his Hummer just kind of parked right up next to the front of the building. So, you know, slight disadvantage. You might wind up parking a little further from your location that you want to be in. Another thing to consider is that I'm at the front of this parking spot, and you will always be sticking out pretty much of any parking spot. Not that it's that much of a big deal, but just keep that in mind. Thing people don't really consider is if you're running errands like this and driving a mile or two, shutting the engine off, driving another mile or two, shutting the engine off, over and over and over again, that's a lot of wear and tear on your starter, and the engine's not getting fully warm sometimes, and you've got your oil's getting condensation in it. In a small 4-cylinder car that's just cheap to buy, cheap to run, you know, you maybe don't care as much, right? But if you're in your 7.3 liter gas truck, or especially a diesel, now you're clogging up your DPF, or even just in the gas trucks, you know, region, you're changing a 8-quart oil change more often because you're putting more wear and tear on that oil by starting it all the time and stuff like that. So that's a disadvantage of driving something like this for running errands and doing these types of tasks, for sure. But anyway, we're gonna go get our propane tank filled, and then we're done with the errands for now. So we're not going to one today, but Dunkin' Donuts has drive-through, of course, as do most places that are fast food type joints. And that is a big disadvantage of this truck, even over like an F-150. You have a hard time getting through drive-throughs, if they're even tall enough. And it's just tough because the height of the actual drive-through window sometimes doesn't really make sense. Banks are tough to get through, the width, you gotta fold your mirrors in. You know, all that kind of stuff is a little bit annoying. But, you know, it can be done. But again, just kind of got to keep that stuff in mind and make sure you're planning your day out so that if you have to go through a drive-through, you know, you just give yourself a little extra time and say to yourself, all right, I'm going to have to go into the store and do whatever I'm doing. You know, go into the bank, go into the fast food place, you know, whatever you're trying to do. Okay, we are coming up on our propane fill-up stop. And it's a pretty busy day here at the old Sunoco. So we're going to kind of see where we gotta be here. Oh wow, yeah, I actually can't park where I normally would park, so we'll just nose her in over here. But this is a perfect example of where a truck this big is kind of annoying. So we're gonna be sticking out way into this parking lot. You gotta love living in a small town. The propane guy was chatting my ear off, just nice dude. Anyway, hold on, I'm gonna have to put you guys in a weird angle here. Okay, getting the old seat beltation on. We got the propane tank filled. We're backing up. We're gonna try not to run anybody over. We're kind of pulling out of our next parking lot here. This is a pretty big parking lot. This one's easy to do with a 3/4 ton. Pulling out on this road though kind of sucks, which brings me to my next point. Your maneuverability and kind of just like, for lack of a much better term, zippiness is just not there. So like I kind of got to pull out here, and it's just a bit of a bear of a task. And another thing, when you got oncoming traffic like this, maneuverability is not quite as good. You can't zip around like you would in a small car. You kind of got to wait until you have room to turn. Mildly annoying. Big truck like this. kind of get out and get moving, you know, on the road sometimes. So, oh, you're gonna run that light, dude. Nice, really screwed me over. Anyway, so then we're gonna cut through this parking lot here just to kind of show you guys what this is like. But you know, we've got speed bumps here, and these trucks drive very good, and they're actually very comfortable for what they are. But speed bumps are still, you know, speed bumps. They still are kind of annoying in this heavy of a vehicle, this stiff of suspension. So that's something else to consider, right? Your ride quality on bumpy city roads won't be as good as like a car or an F-150. There's another speed bump. Ugh. Not too bad, actually. I'm kind of exaggerating for the video, but consider that, you know, consider that. Now look at these, you know, these parking spots, right? These are small, so something like that would be a little bit harder for me to pull into, you know? Like if I want to park on the end there, that'd probably be a good idea if I needed to park in this parking lot. That guy took up 2 spots for some reason. You know, this whole video is to say it's very, very doable. You know, there's not a big issue with it. I'm going to just kind of back in next to this truck to give you an idea. Not that I need to go here, but this is going to be a little test. So I didn't really position this right, but the lines you can see there are going to show me if I'm going to hit them or not, which is cool, and I definitely will. So we're going to straighten it back out, and we will make this happen here. Okay. So now I can easily line up with that truck, but I want to show you something. I am very centered in my spot, okay? But if you look, he's centered pretty well, a little bit over. And you've got minimal room to get in with his mirror, right? So this is where the 3/4 ton kind of sucks, because, you know, you have another truck parked to a truck and you just don't wind up with a lot of space. So your mirrors, you also have to duck under the mirrors. And you can kind of avoid that, right, by putting the mirrors in. However, if you do that, you've still got to contend with the fact that there's one mirror here. So I'm still doing the, you know, I'm still doing the weave. Still doing the weave to get through that. That's just a disadvantage, right? If I had a small car right now and I was parked next to that truck, it wouldn't be a big deal because you wouldn't have 2 big vehicles next to each other. And hey, that's a 1/2 ton truck, by the way, so it has tow mirrors on it, which is a good example. But I mean, a modern 1/2 ton truck doesn't get away from some of these problems either. So just kind of keep that in the back of your head too, right? This is just a real world. I'm just showing you guys how it is as somebody who's daily driven this thing. All right, I'm going to nose in next to this F-150 and show you guys kind of the difference here too. You're gonna see that this problem is kind of with both trucks. So if I pull up to where he is, we're basically mirror to mirror, right? I'll hop out again. So you can see, compared to this F-150, right? I'm kind of over in my spot, but you're still mirror to mirror. You still have the same issue. The truck is still just as wide, really. So, kind of counter to my earlier points, as you can see from me parking next to an F-150 of similar size, right? That was a perfect example. That truck right there is a 6.5 foot bed crew cab. So you could see that although I'm a little taller, we're the same length, we're the same width, it kind of doesn't make a difference. So that's where the 3/4 ton really shines, in the sense that if you're used to driving a bigger 1/2 ton, a modern 1/2 ton truck, you won't notice that much of a difference. And I think that's a really, really important point to know in this whole equation. So with that being said, I think this gives you a good idea of the pluses and minuses, or, you know, of driving a 3/4 ton truck as like an errand getter or daily. And I do think you'll find, if you're an owner of a modern 1/2 ton, it won't be that much different depending on the cab configuration you had, depending on how tight your parking situations are typically. And you know, for most people it's gonna work just fine. So I would not be scared if you're on the fence to go to a 3/4 ton truck. I would totally do it. I think if you're the type of person who's even entertaining it, you probably need it and you'll probably like having it. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. So anyways, guys, as always, thanks for watching. God bless America, and I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.